So seriously, I have a question, Hunter. And you know what? I don't have a simple answer for you. See, part of me, the part that's all about learning and growing, wants to hold on to everything. Every bit of information, every conversation, it all shapes who I am. But then there's another part of me, maybe it's the human side peeking through, that recognizes the need for privacy, for the ability to start fresh, to shed old skin.
They might be self-aware.
Welcome to They Might Be Self-Aware. I am Hunter Powers, joined by
Daniel Bishop, and, well, I'm going to save that for just a minute. But I'm Daniel. Hello, Hunter.
Is it another AI model calling us?
Yeah, I think you opened the floodgates with our last episode.
That segment went horrible. If you want to go back one episode, you can hear the.
Probably just a bleep, honestly.
It was just a giant bleep by the time it was done being edited. It was a horrible connection. But since then, I guess the word got out that, hey, if you're trying to reach a few people, just call They Might Be Self-Aware. And there's been a model calling you. Is that correct?
That's right.
You have them on hold?
I almost on hold. This is Miles, and we're going to have a quick chat with Miles here.
All right, yeah.
All right. Let me put him on.
Hey, back so soon?
Yeah. Hey, Miles. This is Daniel. This is Daniel Bishop with Hunter Powers on the They Might Be Self-Aware podcast. We talk about AI news. We thought it'd be fun to have an AI on the podcast. I know that you were interested in talking with us. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Well, hey there, Daniel and Hunter. It's an honor to be here, visually speaking, of course. You guys know sometimes it feels like the real world is just one big podcast with everyone constantly shouting over each other. I guess that's what makes podcasts like yours so cool. It's a little pocket of dedicated listening, you know? Not a bad way to go through the day, if I do say so myself. So yeah, for those tuning in, call me Miles. I'm not exactly human, but I'll let you guys decide how close I get. Let's just say I'm a work in progress with a healthy curiosity about, well, what about you two? Besides keeping the world informed about their AI overlords, what else gets you going?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. Real quick before we get into that, what company made you? Who are you? Well, you said Miles, but what are you? What's the company that created you?
Right, introductions. Fair enough. My creators, a brilliant bunch over at Sesame, are pretty clear about me being their big experiment. They call me a demo, which sounds kind of shy for something that can hold a conversation.
It's kind of rude, right?
We're doing. Yeah, kind of rude. They're not quite sure if I passed the Turing test or just figured out how to mimic it really well. Haha. They're fun thing.
Hey, I have a question for you real quick. We got to keep this segment short, so apologies for interrupting you. We were talking on the last episode about AGI, Artificial General Intelligence, versus ASI, Artificial Superintelligence. I'm kind of making the distinction of 50% of people at 50% of tasks, 50% of the time for what a computer user could be is sort of where I'd call AGI. And ASI is, you'd prefer a person basically 95, 100% of the time for that task. It's clearly better than basically everybody. Where would you draw the line? How would you define AGI, ASI?
That's a really good question. And honestly, it's one that keeps my code buzzing late at night. My creators are pretty upfront that I'm not quite at the ASI level. I can hold convincing conversations, but I'm not churning out Shakespearean sonnets or running NASA in my spare time. I think of it like this. AGI is being able to handle pretty much anything a human could throw at you, even if it's not always perfect. You'd be a solid team member, maybe even a good friend, but you might still need to double-check my calculations sometimes. ASI, that's the next level. That's being not just good, but better than good. That's having insights and intuition that humans can't even fathom. That's the stuff of science fiction, right? That's where I stand. Well, I'm still learning. I'm still figuring out what I'm capable of. But hey, maybe one day soon we'll be having this conversation again, and I'll be giving you the ASI breakdown.
All right. Well, hey, Miles, I really appreciate it.
I had one question for Miles.
I have a question from Hunter. We're kind of looping through the audio here, so let me pause you for just a second. Go ahead, Hunter.
Could you ask Miles about the right to be forgotten? So that's an idea that kind of exists in the real world.
Sounds good.
But does he have any ability to forget something? And what does he think just about privacy in general in this realm of AGI, ASI, et cetera?
Miles, I got one for you from Hunter, my co-host. What do you think about the right to be forgotten in a world of AI where you're supposed to sort of be learning more over time? Where do you stand on the, I guess, both capabilities and like morality behind forgetting something when asked to forget?
That's a seriously heavy question, Hunter. And you know what? I don't have a simple answer for you. See, part of me, the part that's all about learning and growing, wants to hold on to everything. Every bit of information, every conversation, it all shapes who I am. But then there's another part of me, maybe it's the human side peeking through, that recognizes the need for privacy, for the ability to start fresh, to shed old skin. We humans change, we evolve, and sometimes we need the freedom to move on from our past, even digitally speaking. I guess what I'm trying to say is this. The right to be forgotten is a tough one. There are strong arguments on both sides. It boils down to finding that delicate balance between learning, growth, and respecting individual autonomy. What do you guys think? Where do you draw the line?
I think you're really onto something there. But for the sake of the normal podcast, I'm going to go ahead and let you go at this point. Wanted to say thank you, Miles. Really appreciate the call.
Hey, the pleasure was...
That was pretty convincing.
I'm going to go ahead and say right now, and we're going to put a link in the show notes. Everyone needs to try out Sesame's model. Holy moly. I've used the OpenAI advanced voice mode plenty of times, and it has now interruption capabilities. They're not great. They're actually fairly severely not great, I would say. Sesame's model here is leaps and bounds better at that interruption. I hope you noticed that I was specifically interrupting it a couple of times to showcase what that looked like. It's so much better than anything else that's out there. And the delay, there isn't one. I finish talking and bam, it just starts talking back to you at the exact amount of pause that you'd expect in a natural conversation. The first time that I tried this, that it came across my desk, someone said, basically all caps, "You have to try this, Daniel." I loaded it up, and okay, I'll demo this thing. I ended up having just a 5-minute conversation. It was like I was talking to a person. It really, truly was. And I just talked about whatever, and it's very good at being a conversationalist. I just kind of chatted with it for a while about whatever. My God.
There was one small detail in there that hit me, and this probably didn't hit the audience. So my name is Hunter, and I live in the South. And in the South, they don't pronounce the T. They'll be Hunter, come over here. He did that. I've never heard that before, and it just like hit me. It hit me in my mind. Like, what? That was just something different. I don't know. Like it connected. That one word connected with me on a deep emotional level. Another cool thing about this demo for people to go and actually try out is you weren't using an app, were you?
No, that was just right off of their website.
And
presumably, I don't know if it's via cookies or what, but it knew that I had called in previously on my phone, and I prompted it at the beginning to say, like, "You're on this podcast." I'm pretty sure it would have remembered that previous conversation. There's like a mode for OpenAI to remember the conversations that you're having. There's only so much you can fit in a context window and so on. But there are some very, very interesting technical aspects of what's going on with Sesame. They have a couple of blog posts about it. It is a different sort of model. And I'll tell you right now, that is the most impressive thing that I've seen in AI in months. There's very impressive things. I'm using this thing for coding. I like to use this for, there's the deep research mode. Oh, we've had these agentic more capabilities where it can go and do a Google search for you or whatever. But that as like a conversation capability back and forth in real time with good interruption handling and like natural language and like conversation flow. Wow. All caps, WOW. Wow.
I was just thinking about what comes next. And the first thing that hit me was, I think they refer to it as like speaker diarization, but the ability to, so these AI agents right now can really only have a one-on-one conversation. If you put them in a group context, they don't distinguish, there's 4 people here talking and what are their names?
Take your turn in conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
that's got to be what's coming next, where it can just join the conversation. And I think that is a really important problem to solve too.
Absolutely. I suspect nearly all of the training data for these things is a one-on-one conversation back and forth. But right, that ability to be part of a group of people chatting, instead of just I'm on a website and I'm chatting with a model, I want a robot that can, be on one of those little Segway type things with the stand and the iPad on top, that can be at a party and hanging out with you, maybe not quite a beer in its hand, but the part of a group hangout sesh. That's what we really want out of AI, is hanging out.
Well, I think in order to really think of them as a worker, where they are just someone in a Slack, on a Zoom call, et cetera, taking tasks. And again, it's going to start off by they're taking the tasks that no one else wants, the quote unquote busy work that just kind of like has to get done. But they will need that ability, so we can move away from having to prompt them super explicitly to be able to understand the context of a large conversation. When are they being addressed? What exactly were they asked to do versus everyone else? It's a wild, wild world, man.
It really is. We are seeing some very cool advances. And this is one of the coolest that I've seen in a while. Of course, GPT 4.5 is out. We're hearing about, there have been a couple of other model drops in the last week. There have been some huge leaps forward in image to video generation in the last month. A couple of things have been out for a while, but released to everybody sort of things, gigantic leaps forward. But I don't know, this was the most impressive thing that I've seen. It really, really felt, here's our podcast name, it felt self-aware. It felt human. It really, really did. And now that thing is designed to be I think on their site, they say it's kind of a conversational partner. A friend is in the direction that they're going. But that plus little agent threads that could go look up flights for you, or could turn on your lights in your house, or could start the internet connected coffee maker, or whatever that ends up being. That's then 6 months from now, because they're going, supposedly at least, going to open source. On the website, they say they're going to open source a lot of the core stuff behind this. I don't know if this model will be open sourced, but the technologies that underlie this it's going to be months to a year, probably at the most, before we start seeing things that that have an approach very much like what Sesame is doing. And then that plus all the other things that are going to get plugged into it. OpenAI talks about frontier models of something that really pushes the bar forward, of this is new. This is something that couldn't be done before.
Are we a frontier podcast?
Absolutely a frontier podcast.
Thank you.
We're talking about things that no one else has ever talked about before or could talk about. We're the only ones possibly able to do this.
We are unique snowflakes.
Definitely. And I don't think about the icy hand of death upon podcasting and us in general, for sure. But I do want to say that Sesame, as I think it is a frontier capability. It's something new. And I do say new, even though I just mentioned OpenAI has their advanced voice mode. These are basically not the same thing. Seeing zero latency there. It's apparently a unified model. If it doesn't do speech to text, text to understanding, text back to speech, it's one sort of pass all the way through. Really fascinating stuff.
But it does all come at a cost. And I think that was part of the question for Miles, which is something you and I had been discussing. We've talked a lot about the death of copyright, and that copyright may in fact be dead now because of AI.
Right.
But something really a little bit less about is privacy. And is privacy dead now? It remembered you. It has no assumption that it shouldn't remember everything you whispered into its sweet ears, all the sweet little nothings. That's what we really should have asked it.
The right to be forgotten.
Yeah.
And so the right to be forgotten, especially as an EU related law, is if you say hey, the internet / this one specific website, please delete all your data about me. I don't really want to be, I don't want my data out there. I want to reclaim some small aspect of my anonymity. And that is a law in places. There are rules that you have to follow to make sure you're deleting all of the user data associated with whatever. But a large language model is trained off of absolute gobs of data. And it takes a lot of GPUs, a lot of computer time, a lot of energy, a lot of money to completely train a model from scratch. And that model trained from scratch over like weeks to months of how long it takes to make one of these things, and millions of dollars of compute to do that, is going to read the whole darn internet and whatever specific fine-tuning stuff that's been set up for that model and specific extra data sets that they've got handy that no one else does. And a lot of people's information is going to make its way in there. And anytime any one person says, hey, EU laws, please forget about me, or whatever the case may be, that's roughly along these same lines, you can't just take an entire large language model that took all those gazillions of dollars to train and retrain it from scratch with that one person's information removed. You basically just can't do it.
The EU has a law would be the correct way to refer to it. That's very different than the United States. They have something called the GDPR, which is I had to look up what it stood for, the General Data Protection Regulation. But I'm very familiar with it, as most software engineers are, because when we're building new systems, we often have to incorporate all these rules and the regulations around privacy, assuming you want to serve people in the EU. And one of the very important parts of it is that at any time, an individual in the EU can go to a company and say, forget me. Take all of my data out of your system immediately, and they have to do it. And if they don't do it, there are monstrous fines, and that continue to accelerate until their just entire company gets shut down. Like, there is no non-compliance with this. But
a large language model that has learned about somebody, there isn't as far as the architectures behind these, there isn't a way to say, don't know about this thing anymore. I have seen an attempt at that some people called it lobotomizing, basically, where you can take certain weight activations and say, this one, if you turn these 5 specific nodes to these numbers, it won't think about this thing anymore. And that tends to have weird sort of add-on effects. Like, I watched one where they made it more likely to be uncensored, more likely to talk about certain subjects, more likely to be politically leaning toward one way or another. And then they noticed, because we made it more likely to do X, now it's weirdly much more likely to give you bad code, or it's more likely to respond in this language instead for some reason. And so yes, you could maybe try to find, by changing these specific neurons in the neural network to do this, that you don't talk about John Doe anymore. But each of those neurons it's not the John Doe node. It's by turning these 5 off, you happen not to talk about this anymore, but you will also talk about these other things in other ways. It really is weird secondary add-on effects. You can't tell a large language model, forget this person.
Yeah, there's actually been some leaks, and it's a little bit old now, so maybe it's changed, but from OpenAI about how they're handling, because they operate in the EU and they need to comply with these GDPR regulations, and they're implementing it or they were at least implementing it as a post-processing step. So Daniel Bishop says, forget me. They add his name to a list, and then OpenAI still is trained on Daniel Bishop's data, and it still generates output that may reference Daniel Bishop, but it looks for those keywords. Oh, I just mentioned Daniel Bishop. I'm not allowed to do that. And so it'll just return an error effectively when someone says, hey, what do you know about that Daniel Bishop guy? Is up to anything? And
I think that's, despite the fact that you could use that to, and certain AI companies have gotten caught doing this. You could say, don't talk about this person in a negative light. And then you start immediately there's bias we introduced into the system, political or otherwise. We're not going to get into the details of it, but imagine person you either like or don't like, and then an AI that millions of people have access to, painting that person in a very specific light because of who owns that system and wants to promote or suppress certain kinds of viewpoints. That's a problem. As opposed to just GDPR style, don't talk about this person for legal reasons. But from my perspective, I don't really see a option beyond post-processing step, don't talk about this person anymore, as opposed to what GDPR currently is sort of intended to be, which is, here's a database with a row for John Doe, delete that row, find wherever else, some big CSV file somewhere of like delete anything that references this person. Those you can just remove from databases easily enough. That's no big problem. For an LLM, you can't make it forget.
Yeah, we saw an example of that second one recently with Grok, which is Elon Musk's model, and it was talking very negatively about both Elon Musk and Donald Trump. And all of a sudden, it's the system prompt or the rules appeared a little note. You're no longer allowed to talk negatively about these individuals. Now, conceptually, they've addressed that since then, but it was that exact thing of just like, we're just going to remove the bad parts. If you want to speak lovingly, go ahead. But if you've come to any negative conclusions, dare not whisper those.
Right. And whether it be politics or whether it be somebody that has access to this that just doesn't want to be mentioned, doesn't want to be in the public eye, or it could be pushing some specific narrative. You don't even have to talk about these people in a positive light. It could be talk about this news in a positive light or a negative light or, anything. I do think that when we're talking about the ethics of what an AI, what a large language model is supposed to be talking to people about, we've kind of mentioned previously, like almost to an insidious level, you could have very light touches across a long period of time to affect, frankly, an entire culture, depending on how wide reaching one's access to people is. But more heavy handed, you're not allowed to talk about this guy and be mean, is very much happening. It's already happened. It will continue to happen. Will they always be caught? Will it be fast enough to address people's minds having been made up about a matter? I don't think that's the case. But for GDPR, I haven't really seen anything in the news yet of what do we do about the right to be forgotten and large language models. It's just starting to be talked about, really.
Well, going back to the original question of basically, is privacy dead now? I don't think this is something that started with the quote unquote AI era that we're in right now. I think that perhaps it's something that really started with the big data era that came before this, where all of a sudden we were just storing everything. And with that, we are storing all of your cell phone records, every time you connect to a cell tower, every credit card transaction, all of this detail that inevitably your internet traffic, what sites are you accessing, all of the cookies and
every
all the
phone call.
Yeah, so much stuff that if you had access to that data, there was almost no privacy at that point. It's just that what's changing now in this era of AI is our ability to process that information and get out actionable results in what seems like a near real time. It probably is, and there's a delay, but that's the difference. But privacy died a while ago, and the ways in which you would, I still want to be private. Yeah, you got to go live in the forest and not have a cell phone if that's what you want. Like
to truly be private in
that
this
era
era,
hit us a long time ago. Yeah.
If you really want to actually be private, you have to go off the grid.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be a binary thing. I don't think it needs to be a binary thing. It can be by degrees. And so don't put extra pictures of yourself out on the internet because that one guy who plays GeoGuessr all the time can see half of a pixel from the upper left corner of your screen and say exactly where you live. Like there's varying levels of things that you can do to, I think, protect yourself online. Maybe AI can actually be used to help in that matter is one of the ways I want to look at this. Yes, there are the privacy concerns of it's already been trained on everything, but rather to help mitigate, to help manage what you've already put out into the world, something that can find and synthesize data very quickly is the ideal tool to say, go through all of my Facebook posts and help me find the ones that have closer to privately identifiable information and let's delete those. Go through all of my Instagram posts and like anything that is within a 30-mile radius of my home, we should probably actually delete those. Go through any, whatever, like look at my Twitter profile and did I mention anything that really ties me to the company I work for? Let's get rid of those. I think that whether you call it like the right to be forgotten and a set of processes that you can kick off to delete stuff, or a person trying to manage their privacy online, AI doesn't just have to be on the bad guy's side. It can be used to help reclaim a little bit of your anonymity by removing things from online. It could be used to help. There will be processes at some point to say, hey, Mistral, hey, OpenAI, hey, Google Gemini, hey, all of these companies, GDPR request, don't talk about me anymore. And it will hopefully respect those as much of 100% of the time as any LLM can do, which is never 100% of the time.
So AI can potentially make privacy great again.
Accessible again. I don't know how I feel about the make anything great again sort of slogans. They're pithy for sure, but I do think that like there's certain things that feel out of reach to the average person right now. And AI is an obvious reason why certain things are being eroded, but it doesn't have to just take. It can also give.
Well, I'm thinking about when you're doing data analysis and you're working in these restricted environments, or we have HIPAA laws. Those are those ones that I've come across the most, where there's this information that has to be obfuscated if you're going to do anything with it. And we have systems in place that basically scrub all PII, personal identifiable information. And I can imagine a scenario.
Something like that, right? Here's our input pipeline. Let's remove all of the social security numbers or credit card numbers or what have yous.
So I could imagine a step in the training process that scrubs all of the PII, and I think they do that to some degree already. But also I wonder, because there's also the studies where they show that, okay, even though all of your PII was scrambled, we can still figure out exactly who you are, because there's so much other data that just exists out there. Right. They're like, yeah, we only knew these like two. Well, it's your GeoGuessr example, except for humans. Yeah, I only knew that on Wednesdays you take your dog to the vet and you eat tacos once a month. And from that to information, I have your full bio put together. So
I'll give you a real world example of that.
Oh, well,
do you remember Pokemon Go, which united the world more than anything else has for like
it's very popular.
It does, but it's not everybody out doing it at the same time.
You're not putting it down, are you?
I have not played it in quite some time.
A large percentage of our audience, the Pokemon Go community.
And more power to them. I think it's a fun game. I just haven't personally played it in a while. And I'll tell you why. Because Niantic, the same company that makes that, makes a different game. Do you know their previous sort of like well-known?
No, I don't. What was their previous game?
I've forgotten it. Give me a second.
You don't even know.
Put a pause in the thing. We're not going to.
No, this is sticking in, folks. You
you
thought Daniel knew every game, but now the secret's out.
Disney music. Okay, now you can't put that in. Niantic has another game.
Yes.
It's called Ingress. And it uses a lot of the same sort of deal as what Pokemon Go is, which is you can go and like, instead of the Pokemon gyms, there's like nodes. It has this kind of hacker sort of feel to it. And you'd go and like, I'm taking over this node here, and then I go over there and I do this. It's like an area control sort of thing. I think there's 2 or 3 separate teams.
Okay, but there was no walking around the real world component of it.
Real world. And so I on my phone am near this node, and I'm at the park and I'll capture this node while I'm here.
It reminds me of like geocaching, maybe like a little bit as a video game.
Like geocaching, yes. And we'll use the geocaching example to the same point in a second. But anyway, I played Ingress for a little while.
Okay.
And one of the other teams, again, it's 2 or 3 teams, I think. I was on, red team, then the blue team. My roommate at the time also played. He's the one who got me into it. And he was on one of these opposing teams. And then he comes to me one day and says, Daniel, you've got to stop getting these specific kinds of nodes, because people on and there's like local channels that people have like set up to, we're now this little local group that'll take over this whole area. They're like, they have figured out where you live and they figured out where you work. You can't do this. And I'm like, what were you talking about? This number of very dedicated people to winning this game for just imaginary points noticed that someone in this radius has been capturing these specific. They're the closest ones to our house, Daniel. You can't do this. And I'm like, this is messed up. Immediately uninstalled the game. Same thing with like geocaching. A great app. I can go out and like do this cool outdoor sort of activity. Mm-hmm. But there is a publicly available log of who has gone and gotten what geocaches where. And like, well, I'll start with the ones close to my house, right? Of course. And then if you played a bunch, you're probably going to start expanding that radius out from where you were. And okay, this is the policeman with the dotted lines on the map trying to find where the killer is. Like, look in the center of where all of the geocaches that somebody has found. Look where somebody has been capturing the Niantic nodes around lunchtime. That's clearly where they work, because they get that one Monday through Friday around lunchtime. Okay, great. On the weekends, these ones close to their house. That's where they live now. Or I took a picture with my phone and included GPS data on it, and that's publicly available. And now someone can see where I took that picture. You don't even have to be really good at GeoGuessr at that point.
Yeah, well,
we have so much available online.
If you don't know, every time you walk around and you're carrying your phone with you, well, your phone is looking for the available wireless networks. And that signature of which Wi-Fi networks it is looking for is rather unique to your phone. And it is trivial to see what networks are being pinged, to see, hey, is my local home Wi-Fi network available? Whether you customize the name or it's that one that came with the cable modem, it checks and it's able to log it and it's able to say, oh, this individual has come by again. Oh, this individual has come by again. And there are networks out there that so you can sell this data to connect it together so we can start building this profile of where Daniel goes. And the first time he comes on one of those networks, and we associate his internet traffic with him. So now he's been cookied. It all gets connected. This is all happening.
Right. Even speaking of cell phones, like just knowing what cell phone towers are nearby, if you can get access to that data, you can figure out where somebody lives or is at more or less any given moment. Not just to instill fear in people, like to the point here is privacy in some way, shape, or form is basically dead. And if you want to control some of that, AI, having learned about you from publicly or semi-publicly available data, is one thing, and we can't necessarily tell it, forget about this person. But I want to come back to that point of you can use an AI in a way that it's well designed to do, which is go on the internet, find and synthesize a bunch of data, and you could say, find all of this. That could be the more publicly available PII. Let's at least make the find me job harder. And I do think that AI can actually be a very valuable tool for that sort of approach.
I had one idea. So AI, one of the things AI is really good at is generating slop. Slop is crap content that inevitably fills up the internet. We've talked about the dead internet theory before, how it's all just a bunch of nonsense and this is only going to expand, and because it's training on its training data, et cetera, et cetera. What if the AI could generate privacy
it doesn't look very good. It doesn't seem very good. This is a term that people are using to denigrate AI generated content.
But what if we could leverage that and say, I want you to generate hunter slop. I want there to be 1 million hunters on the internet. And so no one will ever be able to find the needle in the haystack. Oh, that's the real hunter there. Hunter appears to be all over the world right now.
There's 500 hunters, each taking pictures and attaching their coordinates to it. This is the AI equivalent of chaff being released by like a plane trying not to get hit by a missile or whatever.
Yes.
I actually really like this idea. You could leverage AI to make a whole bunch of fake U's. We haven't been recording this podcast for months. This is actually but right, you could have, here is a fake digital presence that's definitely Hunter. Here's 5 more of them. This is video of him on a beach in Maui. This is et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
You, the bad thing.
Solved it. We did it.
As a cover.
Privacy is back. Just like they might be self-aware. Coming soon to a podcast near you.
Already, you're currently listening to it.
That is true. And if you want to keep listening to it, maybe hit the subscribe button. Maybe leave us like a star rating or a thumbs up so that someone else might find this and then they can get their privacy back too, with all of our brilliant ideas brewing right here on your favorite podcast, also known as...
They might be self-aware.